Emilie. I'm the founder and CEO of Bossed Up, where it's our mission to help you craft a happy, healthy, and sustainable career path. And I am so psyched to be joined today by Jordan Brooks, the COO of the United States of Women. And she and I feel really passionately about this idea of not only career transition, but getting more women involved in politics at every level, from the local city council level to running things behind the scenes on Capitol Hill and in the White House, which Jordan can tell you more about in a second. And I just want to encourage you today to make the most of this preliminary conversation, right? We're going to share some advice I think will be really helpful in getting you started in navigating a career transition into the public sector. But this is just the starting point. So there's a lot more where this comes from, and we want to continue that conversation with you and with the folks who couldn't make it today. So make sure you keep in mind that our Twitter handles and Instagram handles can be found at the bottom of the screen here. It's BossedUp.org and USO Women for the United States of Women. And Jordan and I can keep tweeting at you for the rest of the day. Continue that conversation.
And we will.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So what Jordan and I really want to cover today is really how to go from volunteering to making politics your profession, which is easier said than done, because there's a lot of history behind volunteering as the foundational component of politics, right? You have to sort of get involved on a civic level before it necessarily can easily become a professional level. Jordan's going to walk us through some of the areas of specialty that you can focus on when navigating a career in politics. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite sort of micro topics here, which is really how to leverage your past to make a career transition into politics, how to go pro in politics, even if your past wasn't a political science major, or you don't have 10 years of working in the field. That's okay. We're going to talk about how to leverage your past experiences and lots of ways to learn even more about this. Make sure that you continue to use the chat function throughout today's conversation. That's where Jordan and I will be able to see your wonderful commentary and questions. We also have a Q&A function through Zoom that you can use throughout the broadcast. And we're going to answer questions at the end, presuming we have time. But if there's anything to clarify in real time, feel free to pop it in there. We will send you a recording of this webinar, which you can share as you see fit. But make sure to invite your friends to RSVP so that they'll get this recording in their inbox too. The registration page is still live at Bossed Up. Why is this still popping up? I don't know. But it's still live at bossedup.org. So if you know someone who should definitely be in on this, it's not too late. Just have them register and they'll get this recording in their inbox. Okay. Shall we dive right in? I think so.
Do it.
So we really wanted to design today's conversation with this kind of a person in mind. And Jordan, you can tell us more about the United States of Women's focus too, and how much of this audience is who you're focused on at USOW.
Yeah, absolutely. We will. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
So, I think it's about this moment we find ourselves in where coming straight off the 4th of July for sure, but all of 2017 in some has agitated a lot of people. And I say agitated in the traditional sense of the word when it comes to social movements, really requiring a little bit of agitation before action. So, before every great leap in social movement history, you got to raise awareness around what's not fair, what's not just, what's not right. And I think this has been a big year for a lot of women in particular to say, this is it. I can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I'm feeling like I need to get involved. I need to be more engaged in my community. I want to make sure my voice is heard, because if not us, then who? We've seen who. There are some loud voices in the room. And if you want to make sure that that everyday people's voices are heard too, we've got to do something about that. So perhaps you volunteered in the past, but you want to make politics your full-time thing. You want to turn your passion into your profession, which is a lofty and awesome goal, and it's doable, but it's challenging. And you're seeking a career path with purpose. I know this is a really important component to a lot of people's lives, but you also have the passion to see that career transition through. This is for you. This is for the woman who is ready to navigate a career transition That might not happen overnight. Oh no. Sorry, I forgot to silence my phone, everybody. Okay, my computer started ringing after my phone. So this is really for you if you want to take your passion pro. And we're going to show you some of the first ways to get started in doing just that. Anything you want to add, Jordan?
Yeah, I would just say, first of all, hi, everybody. Really excited to join you today. I'm Jordan Brooks from the United States of Women. We're really excited, and we're so thrilled to work with Emilie on all sorts of really exciting stuff that we'll tell you about. But Bossed Up and Emilie have been such incredible partners to the United States of Women, and we're thrilled to be here with you guys. But really, I think what we've seen at the United States of Women is really that there are so many women who are saying they really want to be involved. They really want to make sure that they're making their voices heard. And we really want to help them figure out how to do that. And so whether that is, we do everything from figuring out how to connect people to the right places they want to volunteer. But I think really what we're talking about today is making that big leap into into making this your profession. And I think we've several ways we can talk about how to do that. But I think the other important thing to remember is it doesn't have to be about, running a political campaign or something like that. It can also be if you have a specific passion on a specific issue, those things are turning into political careers as well. So we can talk about that a little bit. I think, everyone always says, well, I don't know that I would want to run a campaign or I would run for office. There are so many different ways to be able to be involved. And I think that really is a lot of what Emilie and I are going to talk about today. But we've been so thrilled to hear from so many women across the country, really, in all areas of the country, everywhere from California to, Florida to Iowa to the middle of Kansas to Texas, people who are saying, this is the time they really want to get involved. And, our friends who run organizations that are helping women run for office are seeing thousands and thousands and thousands of women apply and try to get help. And here's another way you can do that. So we're really excited. So take it away, Em.
I love it. I think just to underscore what you said, that's such a great point about a career in politics. I almost wanted to title this like a cause-based career or a career in the public sector, because we think of politics as being super combative. And, first of all, I personally like super combative work. I think that's about it, and I love a good debate. But, that can also be kind of a turnoff, that sense of, historically male aggression, that's this connotation of aggression that comes to mind for a lot of folks when they think about politics. It's such a great point that whatever cause you want to champion, there is a way to pursue that in a public sector role. Whether it's government, explicitly public sector, or the business of politics, of how to operate campaigns and win big issues, whether they're environmental or political, like electoral campaigns. And operating in the nonprofit sector. So I think this applies across the board. That's a great point. I want to hear from the ladies who've joined us in the chat bar. Are you considering one of these three? Are you considering a job in government, a job in campaigns or the business of campaigns, or a job in the nonprofit sector? So tell us in the comments if campaigns, government, or nonprofit sectors really speak to you, or are you considering all the above? I'd love to hear what folks have to say. And now we're going to get in the way back machine. And first of all, your photo from almost a decade ago looks way better than my photo.
Well, it's not almost a decade ago. It was like last year's photo. So
really? It was like the
it's not, I look similar to how I did then.
Well, let's hear a little bit about how you got started in politics, Jordan.
Sure.
And then I'll explain that brunette version of myself on the right as well.
Sure. So I'll be pretty brief, but I'm always happy to talk about the path more in depth with people later. I think, I was one of those people who was a politics major in college. I was a political science and gender studies major, but I really wasn't sure what I was going to do after school. I really focused on women running for office in sub-Saharan African countries, which is super interesting. But that was sort of my focus of my thesis in college and what I really cared about. But I also really cared about gender issues, and that was, all sorts of across the board gender issues. I worked on sexual assault prevention and things like that when I was in college. And so that was sort of where I came from and the reason I really was drawn to politics and government. And at the time, I was lucky to graduate in 2008 from college, which was, as we all know, a pretty historic year. I applied on a whim because I really, really was so inspired by then Senator Barack Obama. and his message and the people that were getting behind him, I applied for a fellowship on the Obama campaign, and I got it. And I moved to Virginia 3 days after graduation, and sort of the rest is history. But that was, I worked really hard on that fellowship. They then hired me to be a field organizer in Virginia. I then, took a risk and moved back to DC and worked on the inaugural committee. And then before there was an internship program in the White House, when everybody was just sort of getting set up in 2009, there was what we called the Associates Program in the White House and the Obama White House at the time. There were about 40 of us that got sort of brought on as sort of just help before the internship program really happened. And I worked really, really hard and made sure I was, trying to talk to as many people as possible. And I got hired to do something that I really didn't know how to do. I was in the vice president's office at the time, and they hired me to be his photo editor because I really wanted to get my foot in the door. I was like, anything I can do to work here, of course. And so I did that for a while, and people kept giving me really interesting new work to do. And I kept talking to people and asking to help in specific areas that I really cared about. So I went to work for Lynn Rosenthal, who was the first ever White House advisor on violence against women, because she was an incredible person and really needed help. So I did that job at the same time I did the communications job in the vice president's office. And then eventually, a couple of years later, went to go work for Tina Chen and was her special assistant in the First Lady's office at the White House for several years. And then, I kept volunteering to do more work on women and girls issues, which was really my passion, and the thing I really cared about and the thing that I really had studied in school. And eventually, again, through just hard work and making sure I did everything I could, Tina promoted me to help run the White House Council on Women and Girls, which is how I got to where I am today. We worked, when I was inside the Obama administration, we worked with the United States of Women and Civic Nation to produce the United States of Women Summit last year, which had about 5,000 women from across the country here in DC, bringing together women from across issue areas, really to think about how they could share best practices on all sorts of issues and present solutions to the problems we were still facing. And after I left the White House in January, I came here to help run the United States of Women because we really knew that we wanted to make sure that this nonprofit was something that we continued convening women across the country, training them to really advocate in their own communities. And that's what we're doing. And we're thrilled to be here. So that's sort of a little bit about me. But, the last 9 or 10 years of my life was mostly on the Obama campaign and then in the White House, which was an extraordinary experience. And I know a very unique one, but there are all sorts of little lessons along the way that I think will be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And I don't know about you, but I heard, I think maybe like 10 job titles in that time, right?
Yep.
And I think it's very illustrative of some of the magic of campaigns and politics when it comes to being a career accelerator, which is very similar in terms of my story. To give everyone a little bit of background as well, I started off with a poli-sci degree, so high five to women in poli-sci. And when I graduated, also having the audacity to graduate in the midst of the Great Recession, I had already throughout college been volunteering on campaigns. You see, I'd been raised by parents who, my mom being a nurse and my father being a workers' compensation attorney, were keenly and constantly aware of the healthcare challenges that our country was facing. And I continuously heard about how, my mom, for instance, she delivers babies in a hospital, and one of the hospitals she'd worked at for half of her career ended up closing their entire labor and delivery ward because the insurance premiums to even be able to deliver babies at the hospital priced them out. So I was seeing how health insurance and healthcare in our country was really in some ways negatively impacting Americans and how broken the system was. And while I heard my parents sort of yelling at the television screen, watching the nightly news, I rarely, I'm the kind of person who's like, okay, let's go do something about it. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to get involved? So I started knocking doors and making phone calls on campaigns for my local Senate primary back in, I don't even know what year it was, 2006 maybe, for Ned Lamont for Senate in Connecticut, which is kind of a throwback. And then found myself in college organizing my campus, Brown University, on behalf of, it took me a little while to figure out how off I was on this one, but on behalf of John Edwards for president in the primary, while I was up in New Hampshire, spending my, I bought a one-way Greyhound bus ticket, which was all I could afford.
Okay.
And as a volunteer, I showed up, I made phone calls all day. I knocked doors in the blizzards of New Hampshire in January on my, holiday break from school. And I slept on the floor of volunteers up in Manchester and Concord, New Hampshire, who opened their homes to crazy volunteers like me. The education I gained from that 3-week period of living kind of like a very patriotic vagabond was priceless, because the first week or so I was on door knocking and phone calling. No job was beneath me, and I was happy to dive in and take action on what I believed in. And then by week 2, one of the people who was running the field campaign, who would become a huge mentor of mine, said, "Hey, why don't you stick around and help us run the field program today from headquarters?" So I was organizing the field program, and then I got promoted to being his assistant. And in a matter of just a few days, I'd gone from being volunteer to acting kind of like staff and being given responsibilities like staff. 9 months later, once I wised up and supported Barack Obama, and the primary was over, I got a phone call from that exact person who said, "Hey, I run a field camp consulting firm out of DC. Would you like to be my intern for the summer?" And I was like, "What does it pay? I can't take an unpaid internship. I'm basically poor." And he said, "Oh, well, what do you need?" And that was my first foray into negotiation. And quite go very well, but I did talk him into providing a stipend for the summer. That internship led to a few conferences that led to me meeting Jeremy Bird on the Obama campaign and being hired right after graduation to step up. This is post-election of 2008, as the youngest state director in the nation, fighting on behalf of healthcare reform with Organizing for America. So that's what I'm doing on that panel there. I'm revving up the crowd to get them fired up and ready to go pass some healthcare reform, which was not an easy feat. And the rest is really history. So just like you, the job titles have changed rapidly. Yep. And I've jumped from campaign to campaign to campaign. And that enabled me to really get quite good at 2 things. One, being able to meet needs when I saw them and be able to find a way to make myself valuable. And 2, I got very good at career transition and negotiation and all those skills that have since paid off in starting Bossed Up and helping lots of women translate their skill sets from job to job and industry to industry. So that's really why I'm here too. We could talk all day about our background, but let's dive into some of the principles of how you, listening in today, can start writing your political come-up story yourself, okay? I think it's been illustrated by now through Jordan and myself. And Jordan, please dive in here wherever you see me. Step 1 is showing up. This young Barack Obama organizing in Chicago, okay, way back in the day, involves showing up, figuring out what needs are not being met in your community, in government, in campaigns, and finding a way to make yourself valuable, right? Mm-hmm. Figuring out what needs to get done and making yourself valuable. I know a big part of the United States of Women is really about focusing locally and starting right where you are. Do you want to speak to the importance of that, Jordan?
Yeah, I do. So I think the thing that we really like to make sure that we talk about at the United States of Women, but also has been illustrated through literally every person I know, their careers in politics, is really that you have skills that you can help give to people who are working locally. So making sure that that is, whether that is really, a small nonprofit in your community that you really care about, and you say you want to, you have website building skills, or you have, fundraising skills, or you have some sort of skills like that. I think everybody sort of can use some help there, and that's where you can start. I think the thing that we really always think about too is really starting on local campaigns. So, Emilie talked about this. I really started volunteering when I was a young person, and my dad ran for like town council when I was 10, and remember just walking around, sort of like knocking on doors for him. And that was sort of my first foray into this, but really just finding people in your communities that you care about, whether that is a woman running for office, or it is a person, who's running a small nonprofit that you want to support. It's really making yourself, as Emilie said, valuable to the people in your community, but also really trying to make sure that we are, especially in this time where there's so much going on and everyone is a little bit, hamstrung on what they can do. I think really trying to drill down in your community and find out how your skills can be helpful to someone. Really think about your skills too, as opposed to just saying, well, I don't have any skills. Of course you do. Yes, you absolutely do. So making sure you think about what you do on your daily basis. If you're a communicator, if you are a fundraiser, everybody can use your help.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And for those with young children thinking about running for office, what a beautiful illustration of how life-altering it can be for your kids to witness you, a role model, a parent, running for office and getting involved civically. I think that's a beautiful sort of chain reaction that we sometimes forget about. And I've seen many a badass woman candidate walking door to door talking to voters with a 4-year-old in tow.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great point. I love what you just said about knowing your limits too. I think there's an undercurrent here of a little bit of privilege that we should acknowledge. When you are hustling from from job to job to job, trying to make ends meet, it can be hard to find where on earth volunteerism can fit into your day. And we totally get that and acknowledge that. I think, what is it? The price of liberty is eternal freedom is that quote that's coming to mind from my high school civics class, right? This idea that getting involved in your government is basically your civic life as a volunteer can be a really challenging thing. So you have to remember to set your own boundaries and know exactly what you can give and what is too much for you, right? You've got to be able to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help those around you. And I'm a big proponent of preventing burnout by not overcommitting to anything. And in fact, even though campaigns in this country are often reliant on volunteer support, that doesn't mean that you should allow yourself to be used and abused. You know what I mean? If you don't feel valued, if they don't make it worth your while, then they're not quite running their volunteer engagement properly, right? So there's definitely a component here to using volunteer opportunities to grow your skill set, to expand your network, to build relationships, and help learn how to tell your story to other people in a way that can really grow your power. But you have to set those boundaries for yourself. And I always say it's better to be a super volunteer for one campaign than to be a half present, half absent volunteer for like 5 different community groups. Does that make sense?
That's definitely right.
Awesome. We'll send you the link to this later too, but there's a related video I did years ago now that's based on the principles of community organizing, but for your career. This is all about how to have effective networking meetings or one-on-one meetings to really tell your story, build relationships, and grow your power as an advocate on behalf of others and an advocate on behalf of yourself in your job transition. So that's something we'll talk about as well. Jordan, you want to take this away?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go over this really quickly, but basically the things then, and Emilie, feel free to chime in. I was saying a little bit, your skills are really useful anywhere in a political campaign, in the government, or in an NGO. And I think really thinking about the fact that you do have skills that are actually really transferable is really important. So even when I had spent the last 7.5 years in the White House. And I even was thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, what are the skills that I have? How do I communicate this? And it took a really long time, and lots of friends and people, mentors saying, no, you've been organizing a community of women for the last 2 years. You have been, communicating with thousands of people on a daily basis. You've been, really thinking through how to, build a big event, build some things like that, but you don't necessarily think about them. So really take the time to sort of think through the experiences you've had and what you've gotten out of them, and how that can really are really your skills, and really thinking through that. So there are several departments in political campaigns specifically, and then some in government and some otherwise. But the field piece, which Emilie and I both started in, is really organizing a community. So for me, it was making sure I had 4 counties in Southern Virginia to deliver for Barack Obama in 2008. And that really means you are bringing together all of the members of the community from all different walks of life who care about these issues, who care about the candidate that you're working for, and helping them to get out the vote of people that are in that community. And really, it's the best to think about how you can really have the people in the community talking to each other about why they should be voting for a candidate, because people are going to, pay much more attention to your neighbor down the street who cares about, someone who's running for school board, and why their school board is important and happening in that community, as opposed to, someone coming from DC. It's much more effective to have your neighbor talking to you about that. So that's field. Do you want to talk anything else about field?
No, I think you nailed it.
Awesome. And then, so the other things that we think about a lot, communications, obviously any political campaign and the government and all NGOs really need effective communicators to talk about their message, to really communicate that to press, but then also really to the people that are your audience. And so making sure that you're thinking about press strategy. If you have press contacts, if you've worked in the media, that is a really great way to transition into a press role. On the digital side, I think, we have grown up in an age, I think, and a lot of people who are younger than Emilie and I, frankly, have grown up in an age that your entire life is built on the internet, and you really have a really good, not thinking through the fact that you probably actually have a lot of skills to build your digital brand and to build an organization's digital brand. Those are things that are really, really necessary. That's how people are communicating now. So many of the people that we worked with and have worked with on campaigns or on in the government are, people who have come from different digital media organizations, or have come from, different backgrounds that potentially you wouldn't think of as being political, but they're really effective at communicating a message of an organization, or from a major company, frankly, that has a great brand that's been built over the years. And then research is also really important piece of this. So there are, especially if you have been in a policy sector, or if you have been somewhere where you're sort of thinking about the nitty gritty of a policy, or really you really like reading and you really like researching different things on campaigns specifically, there's a lot of research that needs to be done into specific policies of both the opponent of your campaign as well as your candidate themselves. And so the research piece is really important, but also really making sure that you can back up your communications with facts. That's extraordinarily important. Fundraising, development, and finance. Everybody needs fundraising, development, and finance. If you have a background working with budgets, working with raising money for a nonprofit, and you want to move into a campaign world, that's a huge thing. I think obviously there are differences in raising that kind of money, but if you have that background, it's extraordinarily valuable. As someone who came from the government and is now trying to run a nonprofit, it is, it's really interesting to think through, making sure that I am talking to people who have that skill set, because I came from the government and we couldn't raise money. So that's a thing that you really have to think about when you are. And if you have that kind of background, it's really valuable both to the nonprofit sector and to campaigns. And in the government, many times people are running major budgets. And so that's another thing you really want to think through as well. Training and volunteer management. Do you want to run this one? I feel like you know the training stuff better than anybody.
Sure. I mean, I was pretty so much high-quality training when I was working on behalf of Organizing for America that I really idolize the folks who were in charge of that department. I didn't even think of it as a potential career path. And this is coming from someone who now owns a training company. And yep. It's the greatest mix between education and action and organizing, right? So you're really constantly running needs assessments for your campaign, your organization, your nonprofit, et cetera, and figuring out what kinds of training can help bridge the skill gap between where the community needs exist and where we need to go. Volunteer management's a big part of that. So I was what was called a single staff state director, which is a fancy way to give out the state director title to someone who has no staff beneath her. And what that meant was I built an organization, Neighbor to Neighbor, that was run completely by volunteers. And during my time there, we trained over 200 volunteers across the state of Rhode Island in ways that enabled them to organize their community. So it was this really beautiful example of the organizing principle called a snowflake model, which is building out a snowflake of empowerment so that nobody's reporting, not everybody's reporting to me, but you had neighborhood team leaders, and those neighborhood team leaders reported to regional team leaders, and et cetera, and onwards. You build in these structures of recruiting a volunteer, testing how aligned their skills are with what you need, developing those skills sets further through providing really high quality training programs or coming up with them, and then empowering them to become leaders in their own community. By far, the biggest impact that I sort of experienced was through training my 200 plus volunteers across the state of Rhode Island, because even after I left and moved on and that campaign was over, they continued organizing and running community programs. And one of my top neighborhood team leaders, who had never previously been involved in politics in this way, ended up running for state senate and winning her race. And her campaign was managed by another one of my core neighborhood team leaders in the state. So it was just a beautiful example of the ripple effect that you can have as an organizer in communities when you really make training and volunteer management a priority. And that's why I've become so passionate about training as a vehicle for significant movement change and personal development. And it's just such a fun part of campaigns. I think it's a big part of some campaigns, not others. But it really depends on finding the right organization that makes training a priority.
Yeah, that's great. And then advance is another one that I think people that live outside the campaign world have no idea what that means. That is basically building an entire political event, or even if it's not an event, it's going in and making sure that your candidate, when you get to an event that someone else has already planned, is, prepared when they arrive and they are ready for them to arrive. And you've talked about how, they come on stage and how they talk and where they go and what the backdrop is, and literally everything that you can think about that goes into a political event. That's what advance. And for many people that work on large political campaigns, especially presidential campaigns, advance people travel all around the country and around the world on a daily basis. And they are, if you love traveling, this is a great thing to do. If you really love advance work, if you really love events pieces, advance is a really great piece for you as well. And then the final thing that I don't think we put on here that I really want to talk about briefly is policy, which I think also really goes into the nonprofit sector or the government sector as well. So I think, what we said at the beginning of this is that I didn't know that I was going to go into a political campaign. And when I worked on the Obama campaign originally, it wasn't on my specific passion issue, right? It wasn't on gender issues. It wasn't on, specifically on what you would call quote unquote women's issues, but it was on organizing. And then I moved into the thing that I really cared about later. After many, many years of working on many different jobs, I continued to push on the issue that I really cared about. So I think that is a way. There are several ways to get involved there. You can work in a policy department for a campaign, which will, if you're an expert in a policy field, so say you're an expert on immigration reform, that is an easy way to go into a nonprofit that works on that, or, easy way to be in a political campaign that needs advisors on that sort of issue. But I think additionally, going into government and making sure you're advising the government on that is really important as well. So that's another thing, especially on the economic side. If you're coming from a large corporation or you're coming from a small business, really going back into the government to help advise on those issues is also a really thing that your skills are really transferable if you've been working in those fields.
I love it. And I hope that this slide, more than any, can really give you the vernacular to use. So when I'm looking at resumes, if I were hiring for a campaign and you put events management but didn't quite make the connection to advance, that would be an indicator that, you're an outsider. Not that being an outsider is necessarily a bad thing, but you want to know the lingo. You want to know where your past fits into the campaign mentality around departments or a NGO or government organization or nonprofit. So really knowing that I've, just like Jordan, I've bounced between these departments in many different roles over the years, from field to comms to digital to training. And, you can try all these hats on in a volunteer capacity. And then when it comes to actually applying to these roles, make sure you're using the right language, especially on your resume. It can help really show that you understand how the world works when it comes to the business of running campaigns and the business side of hiring for the government or for a nonprofit. Awesome. Okay, so quickly, leveraging your past to go political. I think Jordan already spoke to a lot of this. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. We had a lot more to say about all these slides than I realized, which is great. I hope you're finding this valuable, everybody. And please keep your questions coming in the chat section and the Q&A section. We'll answer them as we go. So when you're making a career transition, this is something I write about constantly on my Forbes column and on the bossedup.org blog. And we have programs and courses available in our shop exactly about how to transition career paths. Like Jordan said, focus on how your past directly relates to your potential utility to that campaign or organization. So don't tell me that you've got a ton of experience running events. Make the connection between your skill set and how that creates value for your prospective employer. Really use the right lingo. Have a record of volunteerism that explains why you're passionate. I think more than any other industry, we want to see your passion if you're applying to a job in politics. Like, you need to show me why you care about this. Did you start a group in your school to fight back on a local issue? Did you write an op-ed at some point to make your voice heard? How have you demonstrated your passion, not just saying you're passionate about something, but demonstrate it through your actions. And highlight your ability to create impact. This isn't about increasing a bottom line per se, unless perhaps you're applying to the finance department, but highlight your ability to create change and make something out of nothing. That's what campaigners do, right? Campaigners and folks in scrappy nonprofit world jobs or organizations that are focused on societal impact are interested in how you have a record of making things happen with your own leadership behind that, really, like creating something out of nothing, which I think relates so closely to entrepreneurialism that it blows my mind what good training ground a campaign was for starting my own business. And then finally, seek out mentors, right? Finding people who are in the career path that you want to be in and being proactive about getting them, getting on their schedule, asking them to share some advice with you and making it a reciprocal relationship of support and mutual respect. And these are things that you can find more details on in that article I mentioned earlier, as well as if you want to really focus your resume on your transferable skills. I've got a great video on the Bossed Up YouTube channel featuring a resume writing expert who talks about a skill-based resume and how that format might be right for you, especially if you're navigating a big industry transition. Just something to keep in mind. Got anything?
Yeah, I would just say one thing about mentorship. I think people always think of mentors as people that are like very lofty people and people who are always older than you and people who have the career you want to have in 30 years. Those are really important. But I think some of the best mentors that I've had are actually peers or people who are maybe just a step or two above you in terms of your where you are in your career. And I think that really has helped me both in the reciprocal side of this, just to make sure you're really helping each other navigate some of these things, I think has been really helpful. So just remembering that mentors are sometimes not always people who are 30-year career veterans. Sometimes they're people that get around you.
Love it. Such a great point. Jordan, we've got a very related career question about slide from Chelsea, who's asking, okay, how did you leverage your skills to speak about and land your communications gig, editing photos in the office? Because it almost did sound like an anomaly in your story, right?
Yeah.
Being a photo editor.
Yep.
How were you able to do that? I have some ideas, but I want to hear what your experience.
Yeah, to be totally honest, it was an anomaly in my in my sort of career path. But I think the way that I got there was actually through proving myself through hard work to the people who were hiring for that position. And it wasn't, it was sort of a little bit of a really making sure that they knew that I could be a communicator by actually talking to them all the time and making sure that I understood what all of this sort of meant. It was less about my specific transferable skills editing photos, because I actually didn't necessarily have those transferable skills. It was much more about communicating that I could actually do a job and learn really quickly how to do a job that potentially I didn't necessarily already have the skill set for, but definitely showed that I could very easily take direction and very easily be entrepreneurial in terms of learning about how I would do a job specifically. So that's how that worked for me.
That's great. I call that something I see happen all the time in the campaign world is what I call a talent grab, which is, oh my gosh, we have this new need. Where are we going to find anybody to fill this need? Where is the closest warm body? And is that
That's right.
I mean, there is definitely something to be said about showing up and being around. And I know that's hard to hear because there are probably more talented photo editors in the world.
For sure.
Killed for that job, but you were there.
Absolutely.
Ready.
I was there.
Willing to learn, and there is something to be said about that. And regardless of how fair, unfair that might feel to folks, you don't need to be born with connections. I want to hammer that home because my mom, the nurse, my dad, the attorney, worked from home, by the way, and raised 4 kids, right? They did not have any political connections whatsoever. But I showed up. I was willing to speak up. I was willing to say, what can I do to be helpful? And on one of my campaign experiences, totally different campaign, a congressional in Northern Virginia, day one, I made phone calls all day. And I was like, wow, this is really how they're going to use my talent here. Like, I was older. I'd gone through a few campaigns at the time. And I was like, all right, whatever. I'm going to make the best phone calls I can. Day 2, I come in and they say, how would you like to be our campaign scheduler? You and the candidate will be this close and you'll be the guardian of the candidate. So if anybody wants to get to her, they have to go through you first. And that was a huge promotion. And those things happen because campaigns are constantly doing talent grabs like that. And if you show up and you're capable, you never know what kind of promotion you might get in 24 hours. Awesome. Thank you for the question, Chelsea. We're almost done here, but I want to make a really solid case for, first of all, thank you for staying on with us. We've got some more information to make it really worth your while. And you've already shown that you're investing in your career transition by joining us with your most precious resource today, time. But I want to also make a case for, another way to accelerate your career transition instead of figuring it out, instead of necessarily volunteering for months or years. If you want to accelerate your skill set and really invest in equipping yourself to be irresistible to your dream employers, think about how you can retool through training. And that's where the United States of Women's Galvanize program comes into play, which Jordan's going to tell us more about. But the Galvanize program, I'm so excited that Bossed Up is a part of this great program because we're really focusing on the local level. We're bringing some of that great experience that we had in DC with the first ever national United States of Women's Summit to the real local level, starting with Chicago in just a couple of weeks, in just a week and a couple of days, my goodness.
Yeah.
To really equip women who want to get more involved on the local level with the skill sets you need to do so. And we're going to hear more about exactly what that looks like in just a moment. But it's an affordable, accessible, incredible program that I couldn't be more proud to be a part of. And you've got to really not just hone the skills that would make you good at the job, but the skill of persuading someone that you have the skills to be good at the job. And that's a different skill. So say you're an amazing policy wonk researcher who would be the best person to brief, a presidential candidate on this area of your expertise. If you can't convince them that you would be the best person, then you might not get the job. And that's the skill set that I really help women focus on. And it's easier said than done, let me tell you. But you have to not only be ready to advocate on behalf of what you want to see happen in the world and the change you want to be a part of, but you have to be able to advocate on behalf of yourself. That's my area of focus, and that's what we really hone in on at Bossed Up Bootcamp, is how to navigate career transition, owning your power, developing your voice, telling a compelling story, negotiating like a boss, and not burning out along the way. So if you want to learn more about that, check it out at Bossed Up's bootcamp page on our website. You can either spend time figuring this stuff out on your own, or you can spend a little bit of coin. You can invest in your professional development to accelerate your career transition. And those are just two of very many opportunities for you to do so. So Jordan, can you tell us a little bit more about the Galvanize program and how folks who are interested can join us in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just saw on our chat, one of our people that is watching today, Lauren, is going to be there. Thanks, Lauren. We're so excited to see you next week. So we really heard from people after we had the United States of Women Summit last year in DC that people really wanted to keep connecting to each other, keep connecting to solutions to issues that we were facing on gender equality. And now, especially in the last 5 or 6 months, we've heard a lot of people saying they really want to be taking specific action in their communities, but they really want to do that together in their communities as opposed to on a national level. People are saying they really want to be drilling down in their communities and making sure that they're helping to sort of work with all of the people that already are there doing the great work. So we developed the Galvanize program, which actually will be in several cities over the course of the next year. We're thrilled to be working with Bossed Up on the leadership track, but it really will be a combination of 3 things. First, it will be sort of a plenary session in the mornings on several issues that are facing women nationally, but then really, so I'll use Chicago as an example because it's next week and it's in the middle of my brain. We'll really be thinking about specific issues that are facing women in Chicago and how people can right then and there take action to help figure out how to solve those problems and help to bring better gender equity to women in the Chicagoland area. And then in the afternoons, we will be partnering with all of these fantastic organizations that are on this slide here to do training specifically on these specific issues. So whether you want to run for office, you want to run a political campaign, you want to be a grassroots organizer, you want to learn all about leadership from Emilie, or you want to become an entrepreneur, those are really the things that we're having people register for those specific tracks and make sure that they get what is sort of a mini boot camp on these specific issues. And then we'll really be connecting to specific organizations that work in those communities afterwards. We'll have a little bit of an engagement fair where people can talk directly to organizations that are in, for instance, the Chicagoland area, for people that are really interested in working right there really quickly. But then we really will be continuing to follow up with the Galvanize attendees in the area by connecting them to other organizations that are working in the Chicagoland area, for example, and connecting to each other, because we really want to make sure that we are building what is a grassroots movement of women that's working towards action. So that's a little bit about the Galvanize program. If you are in Chicago or in the Chicagoland area, we'd really love to see you next week, starting on Saturday. We know it's going to be a beautiful weekend in Chicago, but we always want more people to be there to really gain more skills and help to work in their communities. Additionally, Columbus, Ohio is in August. Atlanta, Georgia is in September. So if you're in any of those general areas, we'd love to have you. Just go to our website at unitedstatesofwomen.org/galvanize, and you can sign up right there. It is $50 to attend just to cover our costs, but if you can't afford that, we never want that to be a barrier for anyone of being able to really increase their skills and work in their communities. So we do offer scholarships. And so please just apply right there and we'll make sure to get back to you. And we're really trying to get as many people in as possible, regardless of need. So we're really excited to see you, and we're really excited to be working with Emilie and Bossed Up.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. I do not know of any program being run at this scale with so many diverse tracks available that is such an affordable rate. So definitely share this with your friends in the Chicago area, especially in Columbus, in Georgia. Make sure we're spreading the word, because there are so many women we know that want to get more involved, and you don't need to be committing to run to office to do that. This is the perfect weekend for you to figure out whether one of these tracks is best for you and to gain some skills along the way that's going to make you really appealing to those professionally in politics already who are looking for top talent. And that career fair, that engagement fair at the end of the weekend is a really good way to accelerate your transition into this field. There was something else I wanted to mention too. This is partisan. I know that we obviously come from a very big D Democratic background, the two of us, but I don't want to confuse our personal stories with this very 501c3 nonpartisan organization. So Republican women, independent women, Democratic women, we are all excited to work together to make women's voices a much bigger part of leadership in this country across sectors. Sound good?
That's perfect.
Cool. So I have a question here. Where is it? Up in my Q&A section. Will the Galvanize program offer dates and locations in 2018?
Yes, we are still in the midst of building out our schedule for 2018 and how that's all going to look. But yes, we will. And we're going to be in very different cities across the country. We're trying to sort of build out across the country in different places. And we're just working on what that's going to look like right now. But stay tuned and we'll have more. If you want to go to our website, there is a way to sign up for more information as well. So when we do come to your city, you'll get that information right away.
Exactly. And actually, by registering for this webinar, they've signed up for your website. So they'll start to and they have a great Friday roundup, right? What is that Friday about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just actually started a couple of weeks ago our Friday roundup of things that are going on as related to gender equity, both things that women can take action on. So last week, it was obviously a lot of work around how the ACA was really important for people and for women especially, and how people could really be taking action to talk about healthcare. But it also includes, sort of an inspirational story of the week, because we don't want all of our news to be about things that we're trying to protect for women, although that's so important. We also really want to be making sure we're highlighting women doing amazing stuff around the country. And it also just has a little bit of social stuff you can easily share, how to sign up for different things. It's called our feminist digital squad. So sign up for our feminist digital squad. It's really fun. And we're still building it out. So if you have ideas, let us know.
Awesome. We got one more question from Melanie in Pittsburgh, who wants to put a plug in for the USOW Galvanize program in Pittsburgh. Are we going to Pennsylvania? Is that on the list?
Yeah, so Philadelphia is on the docket. So we'll have to figure out how to get Philadelphia and Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh together for this one. I think we really want to make sure we're covering all of Pennsylvania, because obviously we know Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are not close to each other, but we really want to make sure that we are bringing people from all across the state. So yeah, Melanie, let's talk about it.
Awesome. And Melanie, I want to put in a plug for the Bossed Up Ambassador program, which is our nationwide network of grassroots organizers who are hosting tons of free Bossed Up events. And we have a relatively new ambassador in Pittsburgh. His name is Kimberly, who you would love. And she'll be hosting a power hour later this month. So you can check out the upcoming Pittsburgh Bossed Up event that we have on our website on the homepage of bossedup.org. So hopefully you can get your Pittsburgh feminist action calendar built up with Bossed Up too. Great. We've got one more question I want to tackle here from Kristen Snow. Speaking of ambassadors, I believe that's Kristen Snow, our ambassador out in NorCal, which is awesome to have you here. She asks, are local boards and committees a good way to start getting involved? How might we go about joining a local board or committee? What are your thoughts on that one?
So I actually think if you have an organization that you really care about, that you want to join their committee, just go talk to them. I've found, legally, when I was in the federal government, I couldn't do any of that. It was just, we couldn't be on local boards and committees. But I actually think it's really, really important to just go talk to them. Lots of people, especially organizations that are smaller, are really looking for people who are young people to join, even if it's like a junior board or something like that for a nonprofit. People are always really interested in making sure they need your help. So they're really interested in you volunteering and say you want to join their board. People are often really receptive to that, and talk about how you can bring your skills to them and what you can really bring to help them out. That's the best way about doing it, but I think it's a great way to get involved, especially in your local community, because a lot of those organizations really need your help.
Awesome. I also think it's important to get a volunteer job description. If you're going to be a board member, ask for a job description so you're very clear from the get-go what's expected of you and how you can be the best board member you can be. Many boards are managed differently. So that's something we learn from organization to organization. Think about what exactly you're committing to. I also want to acknowledge that Kristen might be talking about school board, right? Or getting involved in the local government level. And that's something that I was sort of involved with for a hot second there in Rhode Island. After Organizing for America, I joined a local coalition, a lobbying coalition that lobbied the Rhode Island State House. And let me tell you, getting involved in the State House level is a phenomenal way to have a big influence in a smaller arena. Let me tell you, you can be a very big fish in a smaller pond faster than you can be, and maybe even it might be more rewarding to you. It depends on your preference, but then as compared to a smaller fish in a bigger pond, like DC, for instance. And so you should find out on the local level, what does it take to run for school board or as an appointed position? There are lots of different town and state level positions that need to be filled, but they differ state to state in terms of how they are filled. So start showing up to, so one of the best ways to do it is really to get involved in your local party. So if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, it's a little bit easier, in my opinion, because there's a party apparatus there built to recruit and train and help candidates run or become appointees. So start showing up at your local Republican Party or your local Democratic Party headquarters. Find out what the process looks like, make your case there, and they might be able to assist you. Or they might not want to assist you, in which case, you know, that's not a reason to be deterred. That's when you want to reach out to organizations like United States of Women and all of these orgs like Vote, Run, Lead, Wellstone, Midwest Academy that can help you leverage your way into a local position. So I think it's a great and really important way to be a decision maker in your community, because in some ways the talent pool is a little shallower when the arena is smaller. So it's even more important that you raise your hand, that you get out there, that you throw your hat into the ring, because talented people are needed to step up and make these decisions on a local level. I hope that didn't come across as too dicey.
No, that's great.
It's important. So good. Okay, well, Jordan, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Your precious time with us. I know you've got a lot to do. 1 week out from Chicago, y'all. Make it a while. Make sure you spread the good word about Chicago. Let's get our Chicagoland friends out and get them trained up with Bossed Up and the United States of Women next weekend. We hope to see you there. Any last words?
Just thank you so much, Emilie, and thanks to Bossed Up for all of the great work you guys are doing, and hopefully we'll see you guys in one of our cities in the next couple of months. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Can't wait, everybody. Take care, and you'll get this recording in your inboxes in the next hour or two. Thanks.